Character deaths. Where would fiction be without them? While some series have a pretty hard time pulling the trigger, I'm looking at you, One Piece, the idea of a loved character dying is something most readers have experienced, and depending on the genre you read, you might have experienced it a lot. And while Harry Potter starts as a rather lighthearted series, once we arrive at the Prisoner of Azkaban, and especially in the Goblet of Fire, the kids' gloves slowly begin coming off and are fully smacking you across the face by the time you reach Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. But not all deaths are treated equally. Some devastate us, while others leave us asking, why did that even have to happen? Harry Potter is no different, and in the wizarding world, a specific pair of deaths has left many readers of the series puzzled by the purpose behind them. Those, of course, are the deaths of Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. Were they purposeful deaths chosen to depict the brutality of war? Or were they simply a cheap attempt to pull out on a reader's heartstrings? Let's talk about it. Of all the Marauders in the series, Lupin has the most complexity. Cursed at a young age as punishment for his father speaking out against werewolves, Lupin lived a life ostracized from most society. But with Dumbledore's help and some careful planning, Lupin was allowed to attend Hogwarts and befriend many notable characters like James, Sirius, Lily, and the rat-faced traitor Peter. He would later return during Harry's third year as a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher and serve as Harry's best teacher. Sorry, Lockhart, though. If you are interested in hearing more about Harry's second-year teacher, you should check out my video on him after watching this through. Not only did Lupin equip Harry with the Patronus charm, but he also provided him with some information regarding his parents. In many ways, Lupin was Harry's first hope of family before Sirius came into the picture. Then, of course, in Order of the Phoenix, we meet Nymphadora Tonks, the witch Remus would one day marry and have Teddy Lupin with. This added even more layers to Remus, as it showed both the paralyzing fear he still had over his lycanthropy, and also strengthened the bond between Harry and Remus after an awful discussion about Remus wanting to leave Tonks to go on the Horcrux hunt with Harry, where Harry was named Teddy's godfather, but of course, we already knew all that. The question we're seeking to answer is if Lupin's death was pointless, and the reason I'm making this video is that I'm a bit torn on the subject. I tend, however, to lean towards the idea that there was purpose to Lupin's death, at the very least in a poetic sense. Now, before anyone jumps on me in the comments, I know that Rowling gave an out-of-universe answer to why Remus had to die in an interview where she states that Lupin's death was a way of making up for the miraculous recovery that Arthur Weasley made in the Order of the Phoenix after a lethal attack, and in that respect, I get where she was coming from. Harry Potter was allegedly making this transition to a more gritty and dark fictional universe, but nobody of note who was close to Harry had yet to really suffer the needless consequences of war. Yes, I know about Cedric and Sirius, but you know as well as I do that comparing Arthur Weasley's impact on Harry's life to Cedric would be asinine, and there is a little bit more complexity to Sirius's death that we're going to explore in this video as to why I think it makes it so different from Lupin's. War is an ugly and monstrous thing, and Rowling, as well as many writers who followed in the young adult fiction path she paved, have not really shied away from that theme. I know that some might see the death of Sirius as Rowling's way of showing this message, but I think what Sirius's death was missing was the notion of randomness to the brutality of war. I find that Lupin's death impacts the readers in a way that Sirius's did not, due to the utter randomness of the loss. In many ways, Sirius's death could have been avoided. Had he done what he was told, it's likely he wouldn't have died during the Battle of the Ministry. However, Remus and Tonks' death was not nearly as self-inflicted as Sirius's was. Remus and Tonks, due to Remus's blood status, their affiliation with Harry, and their uncertainty about whether Teddy would inherit lycanthropy or not, had to stand against a regime that would have treated them worse than animals had they even been allowed to live. Had this been some sort of fairy tale, Remus could have confronted Fenrir, the man who turned him into a werewolf, and overcome his trauma. But that isn't the reality of war that I believe Rowling wanted to portray during the Battle of Hogwarts. There are really very little triumphant victories in war, and Remus doesn't get his storybook ending, but rather dies at the hands of Antonin Dolohov off-screen, without Harry even being there to witness the death. Since Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin was a character we became connected to, not just due to his mentorship and protection of Harry, but also seeing him struggle with lycanthropy and the prejudice of the wizarding world. The more we learned about Lupin, like, for example, his friends believing him to be the spy in the First Order and hence not making him the secret keeper, the more we really just want this man to have a happy ending. And his unceremonious death only punctuated the cost of war, even if it is for a righteous cause. There is also some beauty in Remus's death and the way it connects to the theme of paternal love. Much like Lily and James were willing to put their lives on the line for the protection of Harry, so were Remus and Tonks. The scene where Harry tells Remus he is sorry for his death highlights this perfectly through Remus's reply.
I never wanted any of you to die, and Remus, your son.
Others will tell him what his mother and father died for.
Another aspect of the series that should not be overlooked regarding Remus's death is the importance of parallels in the Harry Potter books. Each member of the original Marauders has a distinct character flaw. For instance, James Potter's hubris is well documented, but his parallel, his son Harry, is much more humble, showing how the next generation improves upon the previous one. Much like Peter and Sirius, in Remus's death, he takes his flaw of never feeling truly accepted to his grave. His parallel, who in my opinion is supposed to be Hermione Granger, overcomes her own adversity tied to blood status, highlighting the growth and progress of the future generations, whereas Lupin was never able to overcome the oppression of his lycanthropy. The Marauders, both in their lives and deaths, were the vehicles Rowling chose to use for her message about how the new generation will improve upon the previous one. Remus's death officially closed the book on the old Marauders and allowed their character parallels to fill their shoes better than they once had. If you're interested in a video on these parallels, subscribe and hit the notification bell in order to be aware when it drops. Now, when people state that Fred's death, or Moody's death, or even Hedwig was more than enough to deliver the message of the horrors of war, I totally hear that. Personally, I think I'd have enjoyed an ending where Teddy wasn't a complete parallel of Harry and was actually a kid who got to grow up with his loving parents, a bit more than the one we got in the canon. But I think that missing out on the parallels and the symbolic messaging that Rowling went for in Remus's death might have taken away from the story if he had lived. And I realize that this video is kind of jumbled, but I feel it pretty accurately illustrates my jumbled thoughts on the merits of Lupin's death. In many ways, I understand what Rowling was going for with the elimination of his character, and I understand people's feelings when they claim Remus died for little more than shock value. Still, I'd be hard-pressed to say that Lupin's death was not without meaning, and I think that the fact that it's still talked about all these years later shows the character's impact on our lives. I know that I, for one, really hope to see some future content about Teddy Lupin, as I think his character is filled with explorable potential, and would love to see more about how Remus and Tonks' memory lives on through their son. But until we get that spinoff, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments. Was Lupin's death necessary for the story, or do you believe it was a needless loss? And while you're down there, don't forget to like and hit the bell to stay notified for more deep dives into the world of Harry Potter. And with that, until next time, peace. Hey there guys, Virtual Jared here for the outro. Thank you all so much for watching. If you made it to this point in the video, it means you probably liked it. So be sure to hit like, and while you're down there, hit subscribe to get similar videos from me in the future. Also, if you haven't yet seen the video on my newest IP that I'm covering on the channel, Spider-Man, check it out. And if you want more Harry Potter content to hold you over until the next upload, check out my video where I talk about the true reasons Dumbledore hired Lockhart. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace.